welcome everybody to TransParents. This is Amber. I'm one of your co-hosts here. My pronouns are she, her. You can find me on TikTok at Moonchild77. This is my beautiful co-host. Actually, that way.
Hi, Jenni. My pronouns are also she, her. You can find me on TikTok, Blue Sky, and YouTube, other places at Trans Loving Mama.
And then this is our special guest that we have this week. We are honored to have Alexandra Stefanini with us from Arrive Therapy. And we actually met through TikTok. You reached out to Jenni, and so we felt like when Jenni shared your work with me in the videos, I was like, we have to bring him on because I love the whole, I guess you could call it the whole meaning behind Arrive Therapy. So with that, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it was very cool to kind of meet you guys, not intentionally, but just kind of run across you on TikTok and say hi and then end up here. So I'm Alexandra Stefanini. I am a licensed professional counselor and the owner, and I founded Arrive Therapy, which is an all LGBTQ counseling practice. It's a group practice with 11 therapists in the suburbs of Philadelphia. We have, I would say about 95% of our clients are trans, parents of trans kids, young adult trans folks transitioning in college. So people who are exploring their gender identity, people who may be gender diverse, maybe spouses of trans folks who want to come to a place where they can meet with somebody who understands their experience as a couple. So really anywhere where somebody is, kind of in relation to a person who's trans. Then we've got other folks who are just LGBT, lesbian,
Right.
sexual, that come here. So
I thought that was beautiful though, because it does, from my understanding, what I met from all my clients is that going from a therapist to going to a therapist who is somewhere within that spectrum. And
Yeah.
and honestly, they would prefer a trans. Like most of them would prefer a trans therapist because they understand
Yeah.
the exact route, and maybe not the exact route, but they definitely understand a lot more of what's going on than
Yeah.
a cisgender therapist who has no clue.
Yes.
And I had two or three of them who were like, I never even felt seen until I finally got one who was affirming and really was like, no, I understand. I get this. I get the bubble you feel like you're locked into. I get how you're trying to break free from this mold. And that was much more affirming for them. So when I found out that your whole entire team, and that is exactly what you're based around, I thought that was very beautiful because it does.
Yeah.
It offers your clients, no matter where they're at on the spectrum, someone who's in the spectrum to speak to go
Right.
to for more knowledge. We have other therapists who reach out who will ask us, do you have clients that you can recommend to help this person who's trying to come out so they feel more affirmed because they're struggling right now?
Mhm.
And again, having that therapist who already understands it, you
Right.
don't have to bring someone else in to like console them. You can already say, I've been down this road. I've done this
Yeah.
journey. This was my
Yeah.
experience. So
I
that was
mean,
very beautiful.
each trans person's experience is different, but
Right.
there's enough overlap and there's enough common experience, whether even how people experience dysphoria is different. But I think that we
Right.
understand in a way that somebody who's never really struggled with their gender identity or gender dysphoria won't understand, and how it impacts your mental health, your physical health, your relationships, your development, kind of everything. And
Everything.
so to be able to work with somebody that you can say, oh, you know how that is, and you can go like, yeah, I get it. Like there's a lot of sort of like unseen or like communication like that, where with somebody who was not a trans clinician, you would kind of have to explain things to them, even because,
Right.
I think that the experience of being trans or non-binary or gender diverse is really outside of most people's like experience. Like an example
Right.
would be if your kid comes out to you as gay, right? And you may not understand same-sex attraction, but you can go like, I know what it's like to be attracted to somebody. I know what it's like to want to,
Right.
I'm in love, fall in love with somebody and I can't help it, right? But with the trans experience, it's really hard for parents and family members to kind of really and I have lots of parents that say to me, when they come and meet with me, like, I just don't know if I'm ever going to understand my kid's experience. And what I tell them is,
Right.
it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
Like, all you have to do is like try to understand them, love them, support them,
Yep.
and you actually don't really have to understand. And it may not even be possible. I do find that parents get there slowly, like to a certain degree.
Right.
But so being with a trans therapist, I think, just allows, therapy is all about, like you're saying, like being seen. It's about being understood, that the therapeutic relationship really is the foundation of therapy. because, the work happens when you show up in therapy and you're able to allow parts of yourself to be seen, or you to, be aware of parts of yourself that you maybe have never even looked at before or understood,
Right.
memories about things, or, put two and two together. And you can't really do that unless you are in this safe relationship with the therapist. And some of that safety comes from being like really seen and understood. So
Right.
we get a lot of clients who come and they say, yeah, I had a good therapist. They didn't really get me. And, and we have other people that come and say, therapists will do kind of hurtful things. I think mostly unintentional,
Right.
but so we really try to provide, a really unique, safe space, all the way down from, all our sort of like admin people and our marketing folks, and everybody is LGBTQ. And so, when people come and sit in the waiting room, they can pretty much assume that whoever they're sitting next to is the parent of a trans kid, or they are trans themselves, even if you can't tell. They may be pre-transition, they may be post-transition. So that's a really unique thing that I'm really proud of offering to our clients. We do also virtual therapy, and we can do virtual therapy in different states as well.
Right.
But I really do like that kind of local piece where, we know what's here. We know to send people to get haircuts, and we know where, we can really recommend people, so they don't have to go on the internet. So we try to be a real resource too, of where somebody needs a sex therapist. We know a sex therapist who's really informed about, the trans experience, that kind of thing. So,
and I love that. Like Michael, I know Dr. Stennett, who's come on our show. He's out of North Carolina and he's along the coast. And so he has a lot of local resources that he does for the local coastal area there here in North Carolina.
Right.
And so I do think that is my son, for example, we're in a county that is very red. And so looking for a haircut, it's okay, start going through who's LGBTQ friendly.
Right.
I mean, and that it becomes a real where is it safe for me to go? Yeah. And we're beside of Blue County, so we pretty much know as long as you go into the Blue County, you're pretty good, right? In Raleigh, if you stay that way, we're good. If you stay out this way, no. In other words, I wouldn't send them to local doctors. I wouldn't send them to our local ERs. No way. You're going to the next county over. I haven't heard great things about them, but it's better than what I've got in my own county.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you offer that to your clients and their families, I think even for parents who are okay, great. Now let my kids come out. Where do I take them to get their haircut?
Yes.
Where do I take them so they can feel safe, even if it's for an hour or two every week, whether it be a community setting? Because I know that you put in there, I believe I saw on your website that y'all have sessions that are just for y'all have group sessions with parents and teens as well. Yep, so that they all feel seen and heard. And I love that.
Right. We have teens, parents of trans kids. We have a trans men's support group. We have 2 D&D gaming support groups. We've got a younger teen group, an older teen group, and they're all for trans folks. And, and they are really, the purpose of them is to create community where people can really, ask questions of each other, and kind of get that support. And, after group, go out places and, do things together and create friendships.
Right.
And I do think that, with therapy, I don't think everybody realizes that it's kind of like with doctors, right? If you have a foot issue, you're not going to go to a cardiologist. And so people think, oh, I'm just going to go to a therapist. And really, even outside of gender affirming care, if you really want to work on OCD, you need to go to a therapist that gets and is trained in working with OCD. So, but beyond that, as a therapist myself, so as I've been doing this, and one of the things that I love to do is work with other therapists and really kind of expand their knowledge. So we have a free consultation group the third Friday of each month, and it's open to any therapists, nurses, teachers, whatever, to just come in, learn from us, ask questions, could be staffing a case. So it's important to me, but I have come to realize how little most therapists know at all, even how to communicate, how to talk comfortably about a trans person or a trans person's existence or their transition or their identities. And then that shows the limitation there. And then you take that to trying, putting it into their clinical skills. They really don't know how
to communicate
skillfully, right? A foot doctor is going to know more about cardiology than I would, but certainly not really skillful. Right. So there is specialties within therapy. So, even if it's not us, I always say to people call up the therapist. I just talking to somebody yesterday that said, the therapist had like an LGBTQ flag, a trans flag, and then I got in there and they knew nothing about it. So, I was like, yeah, I really encourage people to call up the therapist, ask them questions, ask them like, have you had other trans clients? Are you connected to the LGBTQ community? And even just from the way they're going to answer your questions, you're going to have a sense of like, are they uncomfortable with this? Do they know how to talk about this? Are they like really embracing this as something they know? So that would be my first recommendation for people when they're looking for therapy. You don't have to be seen by a trans therapist. I think there's an extra benefit there, but there's going to be a lot of people in different states and places where, that's not an option for them, but they can still do that little extra due diligence and make sure that they're finding somebody.
Right.
Like safe, not just safe, but competent, right?
It's both. They need both. And I actually read something, and let me see if I can find the quote, because I went back and listened to, you'd sent me the podcast for Just Breathe with Heather Hester and that episode that you did with her. And I had gone back and listened to that, and you made this comment, and it was somewhere, oh goodness, where is it? It was something along the lines of when to share. Trans people, when to share who they were with other people. And I believe you said something along the lines of the degree to which they share themselves is the degree to which I think it's the intimacy of the relationship. So in other words, you wouldn't tell your neighbor the same way or the same things like you would tell a family member. Like if you were coming out to a parent or to an aunt or an uncle, like somebody important to you, you wouldn't give that same information to like your neighbor. And I thought that was really I thought that was a very beautiful way that you put that. Like it was really up to the degree of the relationship. So you don't, and again, because I think there is this thing that people think that trans people should wear like a
we should
like a scarlet letter. You should have a scarlet letter on you, right? That says, "Hey, I'm trans for the world," and I don't believe that. I think everybody should be able to live their life the way they want to.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it's like coming out to me is healthy when it's about letting people see you, right? So if I'm in a really close relationship with you, but I don't think we owe it to people to come out to them, right? Like if I'm in a close friendship with you, then it may begin to feel like there is a distance between us, or we can't get very close if I don't share this important piece of my life, right? And so as that friendship is closer, whenever you feel comfortable, you feel ready, share it. But like, there's no need to come out like if you are not ready, or like almost like a guilty need to come out, or like a person, I have to make myself come out, So
I think my son had come out right before, in a way, COVID, right? And it started testosterone and all this stuff. And so like the people that he had gone to school with they'd gone and finished their college degrees. They're moving on with life. And he came out pretty much his first year in college. So he'd come home. So his steps were a little different. And so he paused and then went back and did community college degrees during COVID. And so then there was kind of, while they all communicated in this chat, and they're all over the globe. Like, I mean, one of them was like in another country at this point, and the majority of them were spread out across the US. And it was like, when do I tell them? How do I tell them? And eventually he was like, one day he was like, I went into the calculus, and it was their calculus group chat from college or from high school, right? This whole group of like 6 or 7 of them stuck together. And when he finally came out, I think the majority of them were all like, yeah, we either figured that or you were like really strong butch, one way or the other. But nice to meet you. And that was it. Like, that was it. And they all rolled on like nothing else. And it was just kind of like, yeah, we kind of knew.
I mean, I think that if it feels like something somebody needs to get off their chest, then I encourage people to do it. But again,
well, I think that was his thing. It was like, when am I going to tell him? He's like, well, if I go take a picture of myself with this beard, they're definitely going to know something's different. So it was kind of like, hey, I just thought I'd let y'all know. I know it's been a little while since we talked, but I'm trans and I'm on T and I have a beard. And they were all kind of like one of his friends who was a nurse, who's actually nearby, was like, yeah. Like, I'm so excited. I kind of had a hint all through high school, but I never wanted to say something to put you off. And he is within the spectrum as well. And so he was like, I had a hint, but I didn't want to say it. But then when he came out, everybody was just like loved on him and just moved on. Like, again, it was like, we accept you. But it was him getting to that level where he wanted to share that bit of information. And it was just kind of like, okay, we're in the pandemic. We're not seeing each other anyway. So let me just throw this out there. this is where I'm at now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's on their comfort level. And I think it's where it should be. It's not on us to force them out to their friends, to family members, whatever. Like my son really isn't even out to a lot of family because we know their political standing. And we had already heard the homophobia growing up through the household or through the long distance events that you would go to for Christmas and Thanksgiving. So it was just kind of like when he did, why share that information? I already know how they feel.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, yeah, you don't, if you're not close with those family members, you don't want to be close with them.
Nope.
You don't need to come out, just to come
Nope.
out, right?
Right.
So yeah. Jenni, you have any thoughts on that?
Obviously the coming out to all of the family. I hope I'm not cutting out too bad. I do have some pretty poor internet reception where I'm at. The coming out to the rest of the family, I just kind of let him handle. And there were people that we knew. For example, I always tell this story, but at least a couple years before he came out, or right within a year, we would go visit my dad in Texas. And my dad, at this time, we just think I've got a lesbian on my hands, right? And my dad has this book out on his countertop called When Harry Became Sally.
Right.
I don't even like book's name into existence because it's not good. It's obviously not written by trans people. It's not kind to trans people. And my dad had been reading that because it had become like this on the scene topic. And he brought it to me one day in front of my son and was like, hey, I think you should check this out. And I looked at it and I did a little skim. And then I, immediately got online and kind of dug into it more. And I was like, oh, no. And I told him, I'm not going to read that. It's not written by trans people. It's not, I'm interested in hearing from trans voices about their own experience. It also seems kind of transphobic. I'm just not interested. And,
Right.
But every single time we would go to Texas, that Farkin book would be sitting out, just like out, which like it's his house, right? It's his book. He should put it wherever he wants. But my son kept seeing that. And people don't realize, you say things, you leave little tidbits out. You have no idea if somebody around you is watching, engaging, and going, that's not a safe person. That's not the person I already know how they feel about me. And so, still, you can't stop people from having their opinions, reading their books, doing their things.
Right.
But you just kind of let him come out on his own time with family. And there were times that it went okay. And there were times it didn't go okay. But, my deal was, hey, if you're going to talk to me about my kid, you're going to use his pronouns, you're going to use his name. And if we can't be respectful and it's not going to work out, then we're just not going to come hang out.
Right.
And, that's right. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Sure. There's something I find really interesting about, really everything we've talked about up until now, as far as like bringing the community in with people with similar experiences. I'm a recovering alcoholic. And when I got sober, it was, I had been years trying to go to therapists, going to life coaches, reading books. And it wasn't until another alcoholic shared their story with me and told me that they lived the way I lived and they drank the way I drank and they had found a way to not do it anymore. That's when it clicked. And certainly not saying trans people have a disorder like I have, but, just it really is. There's a connection there. Somebody who, and not every alcoholic's experience is the same, but there's some commonalities that we know we hold, and having someone to kind of walk you through that process who really does get me saved my life. So I'm very grateful for what you're doing for kids like mine.
Thank you. So, I mean, I think that a lot of parents come in and they worry that, oh, my kid, saw a YouTuber or a TikToker and they're like, my kid has seen this, and they're just kind of like jumping on the bandwagon. And I always encourage them to like really reframe that and think of it as like their kid saw something of themselves in them, and it maybe either gave them courage or gave them freedom or gave them words for something that they were feeling inside. That's what I usually hear, is like, that gave me context and gave me words for something like you're kind of explaining. And so, what I experience is that for most people, once it clicks, like it's there, even if you kind of ignore it, it takes you a while to kind of deal with it. Like, even like being an alcoholic, right? You're like, like you see it, once you see it and you're like, oh, you see that part of yourself. It's like, it's really hard to close the door back on that.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
becomes a thing that kind of builds inside of you. Like there's something about humans, like we just want to be seen by others, right? Like we want people to know us. We want to be seen. If we're in any kind of state of hiding, we feel a certain level of sort of like existential distress, like cognitive dissonance. So it's, if you think about your whole, like something so important to you being unseen by others and that you cannot be yourself, it's like really kind of existentially painful. It's not like, it's way beyond what people are like, oh, you're just going to get surgery or whatever. Like, why do you need a beard? It's really not about those things. It's really about being yourself. And so going back to Arrive, that's one of the meanings that Arrive therapy has for me. One of it in a cheeky sort of way, like just show up for your therapy, right? Like just arrive, just get here. Like that's the first step. And secondly, about the trans experience is like, for me, the trans experience is really like just finally arriving in my life, arriving in my relationships, like arriving in my body. There were many times like throughout my adulthood, I'd look in the mirror and I'd be like, I don't know who that is. Like I had no idea why I felt these things, right? And I'd be like, that just looks like a stranger in the mirror. And I thought something was wrong with me, And then after I started transitioning, even just socially, right? Like changing clothes, changing my hair, it was very, very early. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and I was like, that's the first time I've ever seen myself, right? And it's like, can you imagine living your whole life? I mean, it's honestly for most people like impossible to imagine, like what that is even like. So, and I think coming out to me is really again about being seen, about being known. But we have a lot of clients work with us on coming out and how to come out and who's going to be safe, and there really is never a guarantee. I've had situations where somebody's elderly parents who were really conservative and they didn't expect support, they would come in and meet with us and they would share about being trans, and their parents would embrace them and cry and we love you and we don't care. And it's like the people you would most think might not be supportive. And I've also had lots of people. I mean, I've got clients whose parents are maybe, Trump supporters, or you would think that they wouldn't be supportive, but they're still supportive of their kids. And it's hard for their kid to kind of square that. Like, how is it that they are supporting this person, but they're also supporting me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, humans are complex. Not every person. An example would be there's a guy here at where we have our office who just looks like, to me, like could be like Trumper, middle-aged kind of conservative guy. Does construction work around here. And at one point he said, oh, hey, I love what you're doing in there and in your practice. And I was like, how do you know what we're doing? Because that's not like it's on, we have a little sign, but it doesn't say what we are. And he said, oh, I was in there,
right.
Fixing something. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And he was like, sharing about his feelings on transness and somebody in his life that was trans, and how there's all these men around him that say transphobic things, and he's just like, cut it out. Like, you're not. So it's like, I mean, I'm often surprised by people and surprised by our clients' family members. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. People you think would be good or not. So, I try to encourage people not to pay attention to things like those little breadcrumbs, like what do they say about other things? But then it's like, parents that say certain things, and then it comes down to like the brass tacks of this is their child. And the love, I think, overcomes the hate and the, everything that they've been taught. So what I find that when I love working with parents, and I find that there's this pretty consistent pattern of sort of like, in a way, like a grief pattern, right? Like shock, disbelief, bargaining, like, oh, this isn't really true. This is a phase, blah, 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 right? And then they really get to like the core emotions and the core things that they believe about trans people, or that they even believe about masculinity and femininity. And for a lot of our clients that are white and privileged and affluent, for them, this is their first experience of like marginalization, of feeling like their kid is going to walk out in the world and their kid may not be safe. And it like just shakes their whole world. And but for the better, because when they get sort of through that process the other side, it's not even just that they're allies for their kids. Their eyes have been opened to more to the world. right? And
Right.
to what other people are going through, and people with disabilities, what they're going through. And it just really transforms the parents in a way that I find to be really beautiful. So,
it's a ripple effect. Like I find it, and you, in the podcast I listened to, y'all were talking about, I believe you had said that at times that it did seem that allies in a way were better equipped advocates to have those conversations because people aren't necessarily as put off, right? Like if someone who's trans is trying to have a conversation with someone and explain something, that person may not even be receptive because they're trans. But if it's somebody else, they're much more willing. And I've shared this on our show. My mother was not receptive to my kid. When my son came out, I went over and told both my parents, and my stepfather was like, "What pronouns? What name?" Immediate. And he's a school teacher, high school teacher. So that was like, he's the safe zone. Like I knew I didn't have a problem with him. I knew I didn't have a problem with him. My mother was like, hell no. It took my mother a year.
Right.
And a year later, my mother calls me. She's picked up a sweatshirt that's like equality, love, inclusion, blah, 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 blah. She's like, and it's in trans colors. And she called me over and she's like, do you think he'll like it? And I'm like, I think he will love it. Wow. And that was kind of her way of saying, I'm accepting, I've accepted this. And then she had a friend who reached out to her who she was like, I've got 2 grandkids. One's trans, one's non-binary. I don't know what to do with this. And my mother was like, let me tell you a story. And I used to be this woman's health advocate and would take her to dialysis appointments and that kind of thing. And she was like, did you know that Amber's oldest child is? And she was like, wait, what? And she's like, my oldest grandchild is. And my job as his grandmother is to love him and support him. And that's it. And from that conversation, now her friend accepts her 2 grandchildren. Right. And so those little ripples, those little just normal conversations of this is my experience. And Jenni and I have talked about it. It seems like if you're conservative, and I say that because I was conservative. And luckily I'd already addressed this and was not conservative by the time my kid came out. But it seems like for conservative parents, a lot of times it is until they meet someone, and it may be their kid or a sibling or a parent, but until they have that direct contact, that direct context, it's almost like they can't open their eyes to it. And once they do, it's like, and you'll still have a half and half. Like I still have clients who are then like, I'll accept my kid, but no other trans people. And I'm like, how does that work? And then you'll have the other half who are now suddenly like, okay, I see it all.
Right.
And so I still think there's stages of that, right? But I do think that there is something about, and that's why Jenni and I did this, was so that just having these little conversations would make it more normalized. Because I think that's what happened in the early 2000s when we were talking about with the gay movement, right? Yep. Like everybody, and I was part of that. In that time, I was anti-gay. I was super homophobic. And Will and Grace and all the normalization of that conversation by 2008, 2009, I had no problems. I had unpacked all that. But again, it was because it became more normalized because people were talking about it. And I think that is part of it now is you have this hyperpolarization because they're trying to trump it up as a like new thing, brand new, and then it's like this radical thing, and it's not. It's not.
Yeah. It's just with really, I think with exposure, with information and exposure, there's more people that are able to express who they are. I really people say, why is there so many more trans kids? And I'm like, well, for one, they know they know what this is, so it's like an option for them. They also have language around gender identity, right? They're thinking about their gender identity as well as their sexual identity, as well as what they want to do for their career and this whole like development of self, right? So it becomes, I think, for them, just part of development. But also, the younger generations just do not see gender the way that even I do, being like a Gen Xer. I'm pretty like it's not that I don't understand people who are non-binary or support all that, but like for me personally, I still have this sort of like very like male female sense in my own head. But the younger kids, we get lots of teenagers that come in and they're like, I'm trans male, but they still want to do some feminine things. They just are not making these same like hard lines between male and female.
Right. Much more fluid.
Not only is it beautiful, but it breaks down a lot of things. Like it breaks down misogyny. It breaks down like, why are women not paid as much? Like if it's not so like men and women, and there's this like huge, so I think that's some of, there's so many reasons why people are fighting against it, but it's much bigger than just
right. I was gonna say that's really why I hate it so much, because it does it cuts legs out from under misogyny, and that doesn't help people, that doesn't help the patriarchy, that doesn't help men who are in power.
Right.
We need those very hard lines drawn so everybody knows their place.
Yes.
I think a great example of what you were just talking about, Alexander, with my son is my son's bedroom is entirely pink. Every wall is pink. He loves that one. He also one day showed me a dress he really liked, and me still kind of like you're saying, even with a trans kid still being in that binary thinking, I'm like, why do you want a pink room and a dress, but you're also, I don't understand. And he said, Mom, I would wear that dress if people would perceive me as a man in a dress. He was like, I'd love it. That would be my vibe. That would be my style.
Right.
But if I put it on right now, I'm going to look like a butch lesbian in a dress. And that's not how I want to be perceived.
Right.
So, the exploration done even within myself about what is gender, how do I know what makes me a woman, what really makes me a woman, and why do I know that about myself? Do I feel comfortable if somebody uses other pronouns to describe me?
Right.
It's just been such an interesting
journey into
what really makes human beings.
If someone, if you have people in your life start using different pronouns for you, and like, how would it feel? Right. And for some people, it doesn't matter. We have clients that they don't care what pronouns. They really sort of just like pronouns, like whatever. They're symbols. They don't mean anything. I don't really care. And I think that's really freeing for people. For other people, it feels really freeing to be seen as male or to be seen as female, And so it's, I would say like, the trans experience is not just this one, I think the media has this narrative of there's one type of trans person. It's really only trans women, and it's like big, burly trans women with deep voices, and, only kids that know from very, very young. Like, it's just like this really narrow range. And one of the things that we really work hard with on clients is that we want them to create their own story about their gender identity and their gender expression and where they want to go with that, and not have any like preconceived, like, well, if you're this, then we're going to say you have to do all these things. It's like, as therapists, I always say to people, it doesn't help you to go from one box that doesn't fit to another box that doesn't fit. Like our goal as therapists is to help you live your best life, to help you love yourself. And that's outside of, I've got a, trans client I was working with earlier today is like post-transition, and we're working on self-love, right? We're working on not related to, and I was saying to him, like, when I transitioned, it did help a lot of my self-hate. I felt so much more grounded, so much more happy. I could just put clothes on, walk out of the house, feel okay. But there were still other pieces of like self-love that I had to work on, self-acceptance, that were some about things I can't change about my body, maybe my height or different things like that. But then there's this whole other piece that everybody works on, like self-acceptance and self-love, like your limits as a person, what you're good at and what you're not good at. And so it's, people transitioning is not about, oh, that's going to make everything perfect in my life. But it really does help significantly. It kind of like, then you can get to a good foundation where you can work on the other mental health stuff that you're dealing with. Yeah. So kind of
I think that's it. That's kind of like yesterday when we went for my son's top. Like the doctor was just like what are your goals? And he was like, I just want to pass. I don't want people to look at me. I don't want, like, I just want to be able to live my life. Like, I don't care about anything else. Just let me live my life. And like, how long have you been out? How long have you been on this? And she was like, oh, so you're, and I was like, no, he's been set. He's been set in stone. Because that was like the last, never really interested, like came out in high school, was asexual, was like, I don't know that I'm interested in anybody. Like, seriously. And I was like, all right. And very cerebral, very intellectual. So again, that made sense. And so when he finally came out about it, I think he was the end of his freshman year in college, and I brought him home because he was living in a female dorm, female roommate. All these things were beginning to really have impact. And it wasn't that he was having mental health issues, but it was like, if I stay here, I'm going to. And I was like, we're not doing that. You can go back to college anytime, come home. And that was really kind of where he really officially stated, this is who I am, this is where I'm at. And it has been like expanding from there. But that for me, like him telling me that piece just made all the little pieces throughout his childhood, like his choices for play, his choices for friends, his choices for sports, his choices for clothing, his choices for hairstyles, like everything was like, oh, okay. Got that puzzle put together now. I figured it out. But what I told when I went to my mother, and of course she was like abject about it, and I was like, look, I was in a marriage where I had an ex-husband who put me in a box and molded me and molded me and molded me and molded me. I don't like this about you, change it. I don't like this. I don't like this. And I was like, and I realized through that marriage and unpacking those things that I didn't like, that I could be exactly who I wanted. That wasn't my problem. That was his.
Right.
And so when my son came out to me, I was like, I put you in a box. Burn the box.
Right.
Okay. And like Jenny, like my first step was, are you sure?
Right.
I own that. Are you sure? And it wasn't like I doubt you. Mine was, I know how the world is. I know how the world is really ugly toward trans people. And if this is your choice, I know the extra things you're going to be up against.
Yeah.
And I love you. And I don't want my kid to have to suffer. And I sat with that for like a day or two. And then I finally went to him and I'm like, I'm sorry. That's my fear. And I have no right to put that on you. You live your life the way you want to. I'll figure out my own. And that's kind of where I came from. It was that you have every right to figure out who you want to be. I didn't want to be in a marriage as someone who I didn't want to be. Why would I ever want that for you in your life? And I don't want that for him or honestly for anybody else. And I think that's where it comes out to, again, with trans people, they could be on anywhere. Actually, all of us could be anywhere on the spectrum.
Right.
We don't have the same lived experiences. We're all going to have, it's all going to be a little bit different for us. But I do think, like with working with a trans counselor, therapist, someone who does see them, I think is really, really, really important. And I think the fact that you work with families, that parents can come to you, and also as a trans person, ask questions of you that they might be afraid to ask their kids. Because I think that's what Jenny and I get sometimes, or other parents who come out to us and like, how did you broach this? How did you ask this question? How did you accept this? Like, how did you handle this? And a lot of times I think that is also another fear for parents is they want to learn, but they don't want to use their kid as the guinea pig.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And so Jenny and I kind of started this show in a way so that we could like, hey, you got questions, come in and ask us, because we'd rather you do that than have that uncomfortable conversation with your kid that could hurt your relationship with them.
Yeah, for sure. Jenny, you have something to share about that?
No, I wanted to ask you what you feel like what are you seeing the most right now in this political climate with your clients as far as the biggest maybe issues they're facing, and what kind of advice do you give or could you give maybe to any person watching, parent watching, in kind of dealing with the stress of the moment?
I would say, when Trump was first reelected and all the executive orders started, the thing that I expected was to come into work and have almost all of my clients say, especially the ones that are newer in transition, say like, I can't do this. This is too scary. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to go through my name change, whatever. And actually the opposite happened. Like a lot of my clients because we don't push people, like if they haven't done their name change and they're happy with that, like, okay, I might ask every once in a while, how are you feeling about that? Whatever. But people coming in and saying like, okay, I need to schedule my top surgery. I need to get my name changed. Like people really coming in all of a sudden, like with an urgency to do things with the concern that it would be taken away from them. And actually like more of a commitment to who they were. And I mean, to me, that shows like a level of bravery. I mean, if I was early in my transition, like, I don't know how I feel right now. It would be much harder than it was like 7-8 years ago when things were things were a little chill in that period.
Right.
And so I'm seeing that obviously a lot more stress, a lot more people talking about getting their documents together, worrying about the future, worrying about, really people worrying about being, rounded up, people being worried about being in prison, charged with things for being trans. I mean, we're seeing some of that, right, with bills that are being introduced, where it's being introduced to be, a felony to be. So it's not, as a,
Right.
I often in the past would say to clients, like, your mind's kind of catastrophizing, you're getting away with yourself. But I think we're in a time
Right.
period where I can't say to my clients, like, what you're worried about is not going to happen. And I have to say,
Right.
I actually don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how far certain things will go. So I try to encourage my clients to make the decisions that's right for them. And we've had clients that have left the country already. We've had, folks who are like, I'm taking my kid away. More of our families are sending their young adult, college age kids to other countries to go to school. Stuff like that. So I see that. I see a lot of just worrying about how do we protect
What's going
ourselves,
to happen? What's going to happen? Probably.
and so a lot more fear. But I also see people going, well, I need to do something. So, like even locally in this area, there's a group of like ministers who started getting together and saying, like, what can we do as pastors? What can we do as leaders that probably wouldn't have happened in the past, right? They were like somewhat affirming churches, but like now they're like really trying to do something. So I see people making efforts to make at least their world a better place. And so that's why I always encourage people to do is like, you can't fix the big issues. None of us can. But you can do something small. You can do, like, if you're an attorney, volunteer for, your
Documents.
local LGBTQ place and offer legal services, offer, legal consultation, or you could be, a therapist and just go to any organization that's LGBTQ around you, any kind of nonprofit, and say, like, I'll do 2 hours a week or something, 2 hours a month. I'm going to do, like, it really doesn't matter. It's just collectively people beginning to go, like, we have to make those, just like you were talking about, in the 2000s when more and more people came out as gay and it just slowly changed people's mindset. Back then, I identified as a lesbian and I was very committed to being out because I was like, people have to know a gay person we have to be real. We have to be like real people. And I began to see it over and over and over that, like, oh yeah, like my coworker's gay. Blah, blah. People just stopped being threatened by it because they were like, oh yeah, my neighbor's gay and nothing happened,
Right.
Nobody died. And so I feel like we're in that phase with, the trans community where there's a lot of political backlash. There's a lot of backlash because there is this kind of like wave of generations that don't care. And they are, like my son, I have a 13-year-old son. And when I listen to his, they can say offhanded, like kind of mean things, even about LGBTQ folks. But when they'll be talking about somebody, they'll say like, oh yeah, that kid's gay. And they just like move along. Or they'll say, oh, that TikToker, that person's trans. And and they're a makeup artist. And they're, like, they don't, it's like, they've
accepted it. It's
right?
not like us where we would have gone, that person is trans. What?
Right.
Like,
Right.
I mean, if you'd said that to me at 13, 14, I would have had no concept
Right.
of that in the 80s. And I think I still would have been in the 80s, I think. Barely, maybe early 90s, but still, like, again, that concept of it, I didn't have.
Right.
And I think I did notice on that same podcast that one of the things that you mentioned, and I give this information out on our show, we use it for our show quite a bit, but Erin in the morning,
Yes.
because we use like her legislative tracker, right? Because whenever we're talking about executive orders and understanding them, that is like, I heard that's what you go to too as well, is to like check it out and to see how really is going to play out. Because a lot of this is divisive language to really scare people.
Right.
And there is the chance that some of this could go through, but at the same time, I think giving parents and trans people that information of, here, go to this resource, read through what was actually written so you do understand just how at risk this might be of passing, so that you can kind of say, okay, so these three, I don't really have to worry about. This one, I might want to watch a little bit closer.
Yeah.
But that way you're not you're not like spiraling out with all this worry about everything that's coming out right in the public realm from the executive office, because there was more in January, in the first 2 or 3 weeks, that I'm sure everybody was just like, I,
Yeah, it was
I even like I pulled away. I was like, turned off my news app. I don't want to read this anymore. I'll go check it when I need to check it. I'll just look at Aaron's.
yeah.
Aaron will keep me informed,
No, for
and
sure.
just kind of like backed away.
Yes, yes. So the great thing about, and I have to go, I'm actually out of time. I have a client.
Yes.
But the great thing about Erin in the Morning is that she is trans. She does break things down. She says, like, here's what was written, the law, read it, here's what it means. And so actually by following her, you begin to learn how to read the lit. So when you go like, I want to make sure this is real news, you go, well, I went to the website and I saw the bill and then I was able to read through it. So I think that's really important. Also, what I see is that the media is reporting on like 10% of what's actually happening.
Yes.
And the bills and stuff that are coming out. So subscribe to Erin in the Morning, support her.
She gives you all of it.
Paid subscription kind of thing. So anyway, I would love to just invite anybody who's listening to this to look us up at arrivetherapy.com. We're also on TikTok. We are Arrive Therapy on TikTok. Instagram, we're Arrive Therapy LLC. And our website is arrivetherapy.com. So I will put all those links when we broadcast this. I'll put all the links in there too, so that they can contact you and get a hold of you. Kind of thinking maybe I would want an LGBTQ therapist. We do a free consultation. So like if we will talk with you for 30 minutes ahead of time and say like, are we a good fit? Can we support you? Not just with the trans piece, but with like the mental health stuff that people come with, right? Do I have somebody that's really fit? So by the time you meet with a therapist, we already know a bit about you. There's a little bit of a relationship built between, and I do most of those because I really want to be making sure that we are like a very warm handoff to the therapist and that we really match people up with the right person. So we try to be very intentional when people come in. And then if we can't see somebody for a reason, we'll let them know.
Awesome.
Anyway,
awesome.
So it's really great to talk with you both. And I wish I had more time, but I have to go. And
that's quite all right. We appreciate you coming and being on.
Yeah. All right. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you. All right. And Jenny, we will be back. I think we have to work out what our recording is going to be next week. But I think in the next week or two, you'll see more pre-recording. So I know you guys usually are here live for us and we can do like the comments, but this was pre-recording for Alexander's schedule. And I think maybe next week's may be pre-recorded as well. So stick around. This will air Sunday night. You're muted. Are you muted?
I'm muted. That's just how I roll. I think next week's is going to be pretty exciting, hopefully, with the person that we have on. And also, there's going to be another special guest, and I think it's worth checking out.
Woohoo! Yes, y'all really want to stick around for next week. Seriously. So with that, we're going to end this, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.